He wanted to make an apple champagne, which is why he was going for a lot of the French cider varietals.
Hello, my name is Rio Windcaller, and I am the producer and cider MC of this weekly podcast, where we speak with makers, cider enthusiasts, and folks within the cider trade from around the world.
Hip, hip, hooray!
Bringing us into episode 494 of Cider Chat was Tom Hart of Humboldt Cider Company. He was talking about the pioneering California apple breeder, Albert Etter. And Etter planted his orchard in Humboldt County in the late 1800s and went on to develop more than 12,000 apple varieties, including the now famous Wickson crab apple, which is a tiny apple that packs an extraordinary acidity, aromatics, and flavor that's really prized by cider makers far and wide. So if the Wickson crabapple is a little unfamiliar to you, well, you're in for a treat because we're going to be going down that rabbit hole a bit. And also in this episode, what we're really going to be looking at is the northern north coast of California. So this is upstream of San Francisco. And that region is what the locals call the Redwood Curtain. Ooh, kind of sounds mysterious, right? But, you know, if you've seen redwood trees, you could kind of maybe get it because they are so big. They're the giant sentries of the forest, essentially. You know, they live like thousands of years, massive, majestic, glorious to behold. And they are so big that they kind of create their own like mountain range just by standing there in front of us. And I love how they call it the Redwood Curtain. And in that area is where Tom Hart and his partners built Humboldt Cider from a small garage experiment into what is now a thriving cidery. And also in this episode, we're going to be hearing Tom share the story of the Etter orchard, the original homestead, and how today he is helping to steward that orchard, those century-old apple trees there, by doing graftings and cuttings so that these remarkable trees can continue to live on. And yes, just to give you a little bit of a spoiler here, you could close your ears if you want to somehow, some way. Yes, there is a Pear tree there too. So I always love to hear that also. Thus, if you are new to Cider Chat, this is a good time, if you haven't already, of course, because you knew you were going to be hitting Cider Chat, to provide you the opportunity to pour yourself a glass and get ready for that feature with Tom Hart on the Humboldt Cider Company and the historic orchard of Albert Etter. But first, we're going to have a wee bit of news from Mountain About in Ciderville. Coming up this spring, there are two really fun cider events taking place on two different continents. So you got a good chance of being near at least one of these. So let's go to the first one, which is taking place on March 28th, and that is a cider salon. And it's just a nice phrase to use for essentially a cider fest. But in this case, you could pretty much guarantee the person they're pouring is going to be the maker, which makes cider salons very, very special. And this terminology was really coined here in the U.S., where I am based actually in my own special spot of Ciderville. And I could guarantee you that I was working at the first ever, quote unquote, cider salon. Probably it was in the 90s. And I remember running around with the cheese wheel and doing all that. And even before it was like, just like Little Meet the Makers. I could go on and on. Anyways, just give you a little bit of a historical data on that. Then we're going to be seeing in April over in Hungary on the 18th is the Hungarian Cider Salon. I just think that this is so freaking cool. And of course, in Bristol in the UK, there's the Bristol Cider Salon, and that's been going on for a couple years now. So yeah, cider salons are just really great events, and always you have that key factor that you can expect that the maker is going to be pouring. The maker or somebody who's really an intrinsic part of that cidery is going to be on hand. So that's what I think really makes cider salons stand out. Now, for the Canadian one, unfortunately, I cannot attend that one. But I will be going to Hungary coming up in April. And I want to tell you a little bit about the location that they have chosen to host the actual cider salon there in Hungary. Now, the cider salon is going to be taking place in a city called Pécs, and it's actually south of Budapest. Erase what I said a couple episodes ago that it's north of Budapest. It's not. It's south of Budapest. And it's going to be at this venue called the Likke Pezsgőház. And that translates into the Likke Champagne House. Ooh, just gives me the thrill saying that. The building has really, really deep roots in the sparkling wine tradition because the Likke family, that is where they established their champagne cellars there around 1859. And that was a period when European producers outside of France were experimenting with the method called method traditionnelle. And that is the same fermentation technique that one uses to make champagne. So, yeah, there was stuff going on way back then, and this building is still there. And we're going to be in the cellars there, I think. Yeah, having the actual salon. A little bit more about Pécs. From what I understand, there is an extensive underground network of cellars that are carved into limestone. And the limestone creates a naturally cooling conditions, like really stable conditions, which are perfect for aging sparkling wine or cider. So for decades, the Likke cellars really were all part of that and became well known throughout the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And the facility eventually grew into one of Hungary's most important sparkling wine houses. So that makes this location absolutely stellar for the cider salon. I have to admit, I am not sad that the city of Pécs is 3 hours from Budapest. I guess that's like using public transportation, something that it looks like I may be doing or may not. And again, I want to just say tip of the big freaking glass to András, or Andrew, as we would say in English. He is Bright Cider there in Hungary, and he's been really key to setting up my transportation, getting me over there. So thank you so much. And of course, Antje Gergely. Who doesn't love Antje? If you met her, you just fall in love with her for so many reasons and for her initiative to get this going. And a little bit about that region of the world in case you aren't familiar. Like, where is Hungary located? To the north is Slovakia and Austria. It also borders Slovenia and Croatia. So Croatia is not too far from Pécs itself. And then you also have on the southern border Serbia. And a big chunk of the border is also Romania. And then there's a little bit of the border that also is next to Ukraine. So this is Eastern Europe, and a lot of history there, no doubt. But one thing, again, I can't repeat this enough. Everything I've been hearing about Hungary is just fantastic. The people sound amazing. And I highly recommend that you start following Cider Chat on Instagram to be getting some of what I expect will be real-time live posting as I go along, because this is an opportunity that I know doesn't come too often, to be able to travel to this part of the world and meet some of the makers there and to see the countryside. So make sure that you travel along with me. I will definitely be enjoying your company. Once again, coming up April 18th, Cider Salon in Hungary, and then March 28th, Cider Salon in Canada. Some good events coming our way.
Walking through the orchards.
I'm in that blossom time mode. I could tell that there are blossoms starting to pop up in different special spots of Ciderville all over the map in the Northern Hemisphere. My friends in the Southern Hemisphere, you're picking apples. You are in that scope right now, getting ready. So I hope it's going really well, and I hope all your fruit is just peak performance. And now, once it's in the basket, then in the crusher, it's up to you, cider makers. Do it. Do what you do best and make us some good cider. Up here, we are waiting for the winter to stop where I am located, but that will not stop me from going on the upcoming Blossom Time tour to the UK. That is taking place right after my trip to Hungary, and I cannot wait. I can't wait to see Roger Wilkins again. He is just one of those characters that just I don't know, you just feel like so connected to him. And truthfully, this is going to be a really interesting time of year to visit him because the cider that they pressed in October, September, it's going to be ready now and super fresh for a wild, proper cider maker like Roger. So I'm excited to have that experience because I've only tasted his cider in the fall, in the summer and the fall. So spring, going to be a very different experience. And that is what it's about, especially when you're dealing with very raw cider in that way that is so melded into the cycles of the season and not having any type of like stabilizing ingredients in it. It's just like press, ferment, pour. So yeah, it's going to be really unique. I will give you the update on that. But again, I just can't wait to see him. And I want to say all these things that I'm mentioning here on the podcast, such as the Totally Cider tours, you could get all that info by going to ciderchat.com. There's different tabs for different things. So at the show notes for this here episode 494, there's all these notes on the main things that we're talking about with Tom and links to Humboldt Cider and Albert Etter, an article he wrote about Albert Etter, and all links to these different cider salons taking place. There's also another page called Cider Going Up Campaign, and there you'll see all the folks who are supporting this podcast via the Cider Chat Patreon page, because Cider Chat is listener supported, so it relies on you out there in Ciderville to keep us going around the world and to get this news out to you each and every week, as I have been doing for the past 10 years. So check it all out at ciderchat.com.
Dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet.
It's time now for our featured presentation, so make sure you get your glass ready to join this chat with Tom Hart of Humboldt Cider, based in Eureka, California. Tom, welcome to Cider Chat. This is fantastic to have this opportunity to sit across from you, to be able to talk about Humboldt Cider, and also you work in orcharding at a very special collection.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Let's give folks an idea of Humboldt Cider.
Humboldt Cider Company is far north California. I know some people say Northern California, they think San Francisco, which is a little bit closer to the center of the state. But where we're located is right on the ocean in Eureka, in the middle of what they call the Redwood Curtain. So it's a big string of national and state parks. Redwood National Park is just north of us, about 20 minutes. And we're surrounded by redwoods, and it's absolutely beautiful area. Pretty much same temperature year round. We get a lot of our apples from Northern California and Oregon and Washington. And when we started in Eureka, my business partner, Darren, had the idea to start the company. And so we started in his garage. He started playing around with different yeasts and making cider in the garage. And then in 2015, we rented out the old milking barn at Redwood Acres Fairgrounds in Eureka. And when we started brewing there, we were doing 3-gallon, 5-gallon batches. Then we moved up to 100-gallon and then 250. And we kind of outgrew the milking barn. So it was a constant game of Tetris, moving stuff back and forth to get something in the back and then putting everything back. And when we were going to leave there, the fairgrounds actually had a steel frame structure because the fairgrounds is owned by the state, California Department of Food and Agriculture. And they had a liquidated building that was going to be used for an extension library for UC Davis. So they shipped it up to Eureka and they put it up. And we were in there a few more years. And then when COVID started, we had been planning on packaging because we were kegs only to start. And so we had planned on getting into canning in 2020. And, COVID happened, our revenue went to zero. We were going to launch in August of 2020, and then we had to move that timeline up quite a bit because we were only in bars and restaurants at that point. And then once we got into canning, in April of 2020, things just kind of went gangbusters for us and have been rapidly expanding the last 5 years. So now we actually moved around the corner from the fairgrounds into this new warehouse. It was an old Bell Telephone building, and they kept a lot of their vehicles in there, a lot of heavy wiring. It has beautiful old growth redwood rafters on the ceiling. Kind of looks like a little airplane hangar. But it's 15,000 square feet. We have 12,000 for production, and then we have a 3,000 square foot tap room in the front. So we have a really nice garden out front. We're about 250 feet from the McKay Tract, which is part of the redwood parks around us. So surrounded by redwoods, you can sit out front on the patio, enjoy a cider, and the building is covered in murals too. Because our artist who does all of our branding, his name is Dave Van Patten, and he's an incredibly talented artist. And he lived in Eureka when we first started and came up with the idea for our logo. The first mural he ever did is at our old taproom. And now he's a famous muralist and travels all over. And he actually just won a Grammy 2 years ago for doing the Grateful Dead box set. And so he won Best Album Cover. So we have a lot of his cool artwork all over the place, and it's a neat little facility.
Who are your customers that come to the tasting room?
It's a wide range. We have young college students from Cal Poly Humboldt come in there. Several of our bartenders attend the university. There's a senior housing facility next door to us, and a lot of the seniors in there. And then we have families. We have skee ball lanes. We have like a little family corner with a bunch of kids' books, and it is really a wide range. You'll see, contractors getting off work and, doctors and nurses from the hospital a couple blocks away.
Now we've heard, the cannabis industry has kind of changed a bit in that region.
It really has.
And as such, it's impacted a lot of local businesses because even though it was kind of an underground business, and now with the legalization of that, has that changed the population for you in that way?
It's really hurt the economy up by us. Rolling out legalization was fairly bungled, and Humboldt County is the county that Eureka is in, and it's part of what's called the Emerald Triangle. And it's the three largest marijuana growing counties in the country, and it's Humboldt County, Mendocino, and Trinity. And they're all right next to each other, and Eureka being the county seat of Humboldt County, a lot of the marijuana was grown indoors and then out in the hills just east of us and south of us where, you can get 4 seasons in the mountains. But legalization hit really hard. There's still a lot of people doing black market stuff, but to legalize it, the government kind of put up some impediments to people where they had to go through a lot of regulation, bring in consulting firms, and spend tens of thousands, if not 100,000 plus to go fully legal. And so a lot of the people invested their money to go legal, and then the market was flooded. You have a lot of legal marijuana just north of us in Oregon, and they kind of beat California to the punch with legalization. It's had its ups and downs in history in Humboldt County. Started the town named Eureka because the gold miners coming in, and it was kind of provision stop for them sending mining equipment east. And then when the gold rush fizzled out fairly quickly, timber was the big resource up there. And so there's a lot of lumber mills, big lumber barons up there, and that was kind of, the lifeblood of the economy all the way up until maybe the 70s and 80s, and then you had some larger corporate raider firms in the 80s kind of took over the big lumber company by us, Pacific Lumber, and Clear Cut, and didn't log sustainably. So as logging kind of faded, marijuana really took its place there. There's a lot of what they call the back to the earth hippie movement. People who were in San Francisco in the 60s and the 70s moved up north as they became kind of disillusioned with society and moved up to the Emerald Triangle and started growing marijuana there. So, it's kind of a long story, but yeah, it really hurt the community up there. I know people are already struggling in a small rural community to find means of employment, but now that marijuana's gone, a lot of that money is left. So
I see.
Yeah.
So has that impacted your customer base?
It has. Our new location in the tap room, we're doing great there. But we saw at our previous 2 locations, it start to taper off with legalization. Right. By expanding outside of our region, we've kind of insulated ourselves. And we're in 35 counties now in Northern California. Wow. And we also do some self-distribution in San Diego. But yeah, locally, I know lots of bars and restaurants have been hurting. Grocery stores have been hurting. places are closing down left and right. Seems to have stabilized a little bit in the last couple years, but there was definitely a major financial downturn related to marijuana legalization.
I was wondering about that for a company called Humboldt.
When I moved to Humboldt in 2011, for comparison, marijuana was priced at, around $1,000 to $1,500 a pound. 10, 15 years before that, it was at $3,000 to $4,000 a pound. And now here we are in 2026, and people are selling pounds for as low as $300. Wow. So for the energy and cost of producing it, it's just not there anymore with legal marijuana. I know a lot of people are still doing black market stuff around us, but it's risky.
My goodness, wow. People don't really think of that ripple effect, how it impacts other businesses. And so one of the thoughts was like, how does that impact a cidery when all of a sudden you lose a massive amount of your population because they can't make ends meet there, right?
Yeah.
And they're of a certain ilk where they might actually really want a farm-to-table product that you're serving. Did you have to do more outreach, or you were already kind of rolling the ball at that point?
We were already kind of expanding, and so we, since starting in Darren's garage, 11 years ago now, we've just been gradually expanding bit by bit. We haven't had any investors, it's all kind of self-funded, just reinvest and trying to grow slowly and strategically. But it definitely has impacted Humboldt County. And if there's a town that you drive through coming from the south called Garberville, and Garberville is where you really see the impact. Lots of bars and restaurants are vacant on Main Street. A lot of the shops are gone because that was kind of the ground zero for the southern Humboldt grow scene. And removing all that money now has the town right next door, Redway, lost their grocery store.
Wow.
So that's
a big hit for a community. My goodness.
Especially a small town.
Yeah. So. And I think for folks who aren't familiar with California, it's like this massive state. It could be its own country, right?
It's huge.
From one, the top is Oregon and then down to like Mexico. And all these like little regions in between. And that region in particular was booming. But you sounds like you're pretty, things are going well for Humboldt Cider. So now you're bringing in apples.
Yes.
Would you consider yourself a modern cidery then in that?
Yes, I would. We get a lot of apples from around us in Humboldt, Mendocino County in the fall. When we first started, we wanted to do all single varietal dry ciders, and that's what we were focusing on. But then as we started to make more fruited ciders, like our cherry cider, which is our #1 bestseller, it kind of pushed us in a direction to pay the bills. And I really enjoy, our fruited ciders and our sweeter stuff. But those apples come from two different presses. One is in Camino in El Dorado County, and then the other one's up in Hood River, Oregon. So it's using apples from both Washington, Oregon, and Northern California. Being as rural as we are, we're 4.5 hours north of San Francisco. And then the closest town, and so the closest city to us is Redding to the east, and it's about 100 miles, but it takes over 3 hours to drive there because you're driving through the mountains.
No highways.
So no highways
into where you are.
Yeah,
so why the heck would you, of all places, pick that where you're having to ship in juice probably in tanker trucks, right?
Yes, we're using tankers now.
What a business model. I mean, that is like. But obviously you're successful, so how did that work in your business planning?
I don't know how much we planned. I know we kind of envisioned staying at the milking barn forever at one point when we first started.
Were you using the milking tanks?
No, we weren't, no.
Like the brewers would do that, right? The old 300-gallon stainless steel tanks for the milk, but
we were using the flex tanks.
Okay, flex tanks. Yeah. What do you use now?
Well, we use wine fermenters. So we have 2 big fermentation tanks, and we have some smaller jacketed fermenters too. So our big fermentation tanks are 5,500 gallons.
That's a good size.
And then we have a couple 3,000-gallon ones as well.
And that's it. That's your entire production area. The juice comes in, it's all pre-pressed. Then you just go into the fermented. What's your turnover rate for your cider?
It takes about a month. We do have some barrel aged stuff that we do, and that's longer. And we're still doing like the small batch single varietals and blends from smaller orchards closer to us. We've also gotten some down a couple years ago, and we're going to bring it back next year from 5 Mile Orchard down in
Great.
Yep, down south by Santa Cruz.
Yeah, with Jake Mann's. Yeah, 5 Mile Orchard there.
Yep.
It's Monterey Bay area.
And we get Gravensteins from Sonoma County. That's a big one that we do every year.
Great.
We do around 3,000 gallons of Gravenstein single varietal a year. I love Gravenstein apple, the quintessential California apple. And
beautiful.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious, the name Humboldt, talk about a good business move. And it's also a bold one because when you take a territory, there could be some like trademark stuff there.
Yes, yeah.
But I imagine folks enjoy like grabbing, a can of Humboldt. Like they're did that play into your home marketing for that, or after the fact?
It didn't. That was my business partner Darren's idea.
Okay.
So Darren started the cider company with his wife Michelle, and then Jamie Ashton, who owned the homebrew store in Eureka, and then I was hired as their first employee when they moved over to the milking barn, and then very early on realized that I'd found my passion. I went up to an orchard in Applegate, Oregon, called Apple Outlaw, or Thompson Creek Organics, and did a tour up there with the former owner Blair, and he showed me how to prune and how to graft, and I think that was kind of an instrumental moment for me as to, a light bulb went off, like, wow, I found my passion. Yeah. And so, I tried to make myself indispensable to the company and wanted to become partners with them, and then after about a year, I bought in both with money and then with work equity, and we've been partners since 2016. So
fantastic! Wow, yeah, it's kind of like the slow burn, right, to the rising peak, and it sounds like it's rising. Like how does the future look for Humboldt cider?
So we're probably going to move into Southern Oregon here in 2026. We've had interest from some distributors in Nevada as well, have reached out to us in the last 6 months. So I actually had a meeting this morning about setting up meetings with some distributors in Southern Oregon. So I don't want to get too big. I think we could handle Oregon, Nevada, and California, possibly Washington, but beyond that, the bigger you get, the more problems you see.
Right, you got the sweet spot.
And that sweet spot right now.
Yeah, and that's good to be wary of that because it does become more complicated. And then you're just doing it full time, and that's it. Right?
Yes.
So, yeah, you know exactly what I'm saying. So yeah, I'm kind of curious. Like Nevada, that's a really underserved area.
Yes.
So would that be in like Las Vegas, Nevada type of area?
The distributor that's reached out to us does primarily northern Nevada, so like Reno area.
Yeah, Reno, by Tahoe. Yeah, folks listening right now, Tahoe is this like incredible lake up there, and
it's beautiful.
Yeah, you got the boundary, the state boundary right there. Reno on one side, and there is a certain clientele. They're coming a lot of like second homes up there and stuff.
Yes.
So folks that might be a little cider savvy too. Right.
Yep, and that's one of the biggest apple growing regions, or the biggest apple growing region currently in California is just west of Lake Tahoe, Apple Hill area. And, that's where a lot of the 49ers went, the gold miners in the 1849 through the 50s. And then, as a lot of those claims, dried up, they had to turn to a different profession, and a lot of them, planted orchards. So those orchards are still there from that era, and then, it's kind of been passed down generation to generation, and there's still it's called Apple Hill, so it's even in the name.
It's a beautiful thing. Who doesn't love Apple Hill? Yeah, there's a couple of different growing regions in California, and I want to ask a little bit about your role as a board member for the American Cider Association.
Yes.
Can you let listeners in on that?
Sure. So I was elected as the board member for the Pacific Coast region, which covers California and Hawaii. And this is my first year, so entering year 2 here. And we have monthly meetings, and then we have several committees where we focus on how we can better promote the cider industry in both our regions and across the country, how we can educate the public, and then also trying to work with government on how to tweak some regulations that don't really make sense.
Yeah, well, that's always a full-time job. So I'm kind of curious, we just got the news that Martinelli's is no longer buying the product from the regional orchards there,
Yes.
and is kind of doing essentially what Humboldt Cider is doing, buying outside of state
Yes.
and bringing the juice down, which is really impacting those local orchards in the Monterey Bay area. How do you, as a board member representing California, approach bringing product outside of the state into your cidery?
Well, for us, it's kind of a supply and demand thing, and where we live, it's like I was saying earlier, it's hard to bring apples in and press them there. We do have a couple presses that we run in the fall, and we buy apples from any local orchard in Humboldt County that wants to sell it to us. I guess there can be some controversy there with buying apples outside the area, but there, if we're trying to keep our costs down and have a product on the shelf that consumers, both enjoy and can afford, that's kind of a workaround that we have to do. It doesn't mean that we don't buy from California. Like I said, we produced 3,000 gallons of Gravensteins last year, and then buy a lot from Humboldt County, from Mendocino. But yeah, I know it's a tough one for the apple growers with Martinelli's leaving.
Yeah. How does those tankers come down from Washington State or Oregon? Do they have a different route?
So they take I-5 and then they come over on Highway 199, which comes essentially from Medford over to Crescent City.
So is that a little bit easier of a route than coming inland?
I don't know if any of the
there is
routes
no easy route.
are easy to us.
There is no easy route to Humboldt.
Yeah, that's why they call it the Redwood Curtain. So there's three ways in. There's Highway 199, which then comes over to Highway 101.
Yeah.
And 101 runs through Eureka. So you'd come down from the north, you take that route, but you go through Redwood National Park, so it's kind of a bottleneck there and restrictions on truck size. And then east of us is Highway 299, which is a beautiful highway that follows the Trinity River through the coastal range. It's absolutely stunning. I go over to Redding a lot on that highway, and I see a bald eagle almost every time. I've seen mountain lions on that road. It's a stunning drive, but it's very difficult. And then you have from the south Highway 101 again, but that's going to run through a part of the Redwood National State Park down there called Richardson Grove, and that's it has massive old growth redwoods on either side of the highway, and that also puts restrictions on truck sizes. Mm-hmm. So freight is a major issue for where we live. I have a friend who's worked for Lagunitas for several decades, and when we were first starting to outgrow the milking barn, he said, why don't you move over to I-5? So it'll make a lot more sense if you guys keep growing. But we love where we live, and we become kind of a cog in the local community. We have 18 employees now, not just myself and my partners, and yeah. Do what we do.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen a redwood forest, it's kind of hard to imagine, but they're just the biggest trees in the world. So we're not talking about a small tree next to the highway. We're talking about giant kings out there.
That can be 10 meters in diameter.
Yeah.
For the international.
Try to imagine that size.
Yes.
They used to carve them so you could drive a car through it. So it's a different kind of landscape for sure.
Yeah, they can count the rings all the way back to 2,000, 2,500 years. These trees.
Yeah, it's a sight to behold. Just making that trip alone is worth a visit. Just to have that experience of driving. Everything that Tom is saying there would be really worth it.
It's beautiful. And if you like the outdoors, there's trails everywhere. There's beautiful beaches. When people come up and visit me from south of us in California, when we go to the beach, they're always surprised. They're like, nobody's here. You won't see anybody on a trail. Rare to see people on a trail unless you're going to some of the main ones in Redwood National Park. Mm-hmm. But there's trails everywhere. There's 6 Rivers National Forest. There's 6 major rivers that run through the county, and each one of them has their own unique characteristics. For instance, the Trinity River, one of my favorites, runs through some white granite mountains, and so at the river bends deposits these beautiful sand beaches, and the minerals from the rocks turn it like a turquoise color. You could think you're in the Caribbean sitting out there in the summer. In that area, 20 minutes east of us can get up to 100 degrees in the summer.
It's so crazy to imagine, but it's so true. If you don't experience that, you don't know it. But I have, and California, really, it has it all. It really does.
And fishing is huge by us too. It's really big industry.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, if you guys like salmon fishing.
Salmon, okay, yeah.
Ocean fishing, you know, we have different seasons. We have halibut, we have, you know, the rockfish season, tuna. And as the water's warm, we're seeing a lot of tropical fish coming up by us that are typically further south.
Interesting, huh? I haven't heard that. What about lodging in the area? If somebody's like coming up on a trip, is it places to stay?
Yes, there's plenty of hotels. I would recommend if you're coming, there's a beautiful old Victorian in Old Town Eureka called the Inn at 2nd and C. If you want to stay in Arcata, there's a Hotel Arcata on the plaza, and Arcata has one of the best farmers markets you will ever attend. It is incredible. It's every Saturday. You know, big agricultural region, and there's something for everyone there, from, you know, fruits and vegetables to carnivorous plants to face painting for your kids.
Oh, I love that. That's a good tip there. And what was that? Inn on what C?
Inn at 2nd and C.
Secondton.
Yeah, Second Street.
Second, okay.
Second and C. Sorry, I was
Second and C.
I spent almost a whole day in an airport, so I'm a little congested right now for all the presser changes.
Yeah, we're just helping each other out there.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. We want to make sure we get it right, because if you're kind of doing a search for that.
It's also known as the Eagle House, is you know, the name.
Because
of
you could see some eagles there.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Of course. Okay. Once you're listening to this, I know that you're Californian dreaming right now, as am I. So you have a whole can selection. You have some single, like one-off kind of. How large are those batches?
The biggest one we do is Grafting. Every year it gets bigger. This year, like I said, we got up to 3,000 gallons. We also do single varietal McIntosh, and that one ranges depending on, you know, we used to get most of those apples from Southern Oregon, from Applegate. We're no longer able to get it from that orchard, so that one's a tough one, but we got some from 5 Mile 2 years ago. We had to skip it this year because we were having some issues with a lawsuit with one of our distributors that kind of knocked out some of our finances there during harvest season. It wasn't good timing.
Ouch.
But yeah, we have McIntosh, we have Grafting, we do a Wickson crab single varietal. We do some small batch pink pearl stuff, but those are only in the hundreds of gallons, and we typically just sell those in the Taproom or around Humboldt County. Another one that we do, which might be a good segue into this, is Albert's Experiment. And so Albert Etter, famous plant breeder, is from Humboldt County. Ettersburg is a small town west of Garberville, south of Eureka, and named after him. He planted an orchard, or started his homestead in 1894, and the orchard's still there. So I'm friends with the ranch owners that own it, Marty and Maury Hobbs. Marty is a CAL FIRE chief, recently retired, and then both of them are running the ranch. They have cattle out there, several thousand acres, and Albert's homestead is on there, along with several other homestead orchards on the property.
Would that have been his brother's?
His brother has one on the other side of the ridge, and then he had supplied trees to a lot of his neighbors. It used to be broken up with the Homestead Act, the land, I think it was land office, I forget the title of the government branch, but they gave out 160 acre parcels when people moved into that area in the 1800s. And so Albert had a 160 acre parcel, so did his neighbors. But, you know, as time went by, you know, people came and went, and those 160 acre parcels were in that direct location, were bought up by the French family, which Maury Hobbs, her great-grandfather, was neighbors with Albert. And so he kind of bought up several ranches during the Great Depression as well, and they grew from there.
Now, just to like really throw this out, because I don't know if a lot of people know some of the specific varieties that he, I don't know what you would say, patent or something like that?
Yeah, so he sold 7 varieties through the California Nursery Company. Albert Etter was born in 1872, and he became famous in the 1920s for breeding strawberries. He was born with a natural green thumb, you know, had his first garden at 3 and started hybridizing at 6. And by the time he started his homestead in 1894, he was well versed in plant breeding. And he focused at the beginning on strawberries and became famous for that. There's a George Darrow book called The Strawberry, and it lists Albert Etter as one of the great contributors to strawberry lineage. But his real passion was with apples. And back then, it was all standard rootstock, so it took a little bit longer for them to mature and for him to figure out which ones he liked and which one he didn't. But he bred over 12,000 varieties by himself and then selected several dozen, and towards later in his life, he was a little bit disappointed that he hadn't received, some of the acclaim that he had for the strawberries. So he partnered up with the Redding family, which owned the California Nursery Company, and they released 7 of his varieties in a catalog. I believe it was 1942. But his most famous one, it depends what region, but by us, his most famous one is the Waltana. It kind of looks like a Gravenstein. It really sweet, sugary, gets that nice water core on the inside. Pink Pearl is probably the one that most people know. It looks like a little bit like a Granny Smith, but you bite into it and it's pink on the inside. He was very interested in breeding red fruit. So he bred, pink and white and red strawberries, and he was trying to do the same with apples. There's a whole line of red-fleshed apples out there now that were preserved by Ram Fishman, who lived in that vicinity until he passed away a couple years ago. He still lived out there and started Greenmantle Nursery with some cuttings from the orchard that we get our apples from. So the Waltana, the John Wynn, the Pink Pearl, and the Wickson, which has really become a popular cider variety.
Yeah.
It's a delicious little apple too, I must say.
It is.
It's a pain to pick them because they're little, but
tasty.
Oh, they're so good.
Yeah, and that people make single varietal Wickson crab, ciders, and also blend it in too. So I think a lot of folks don't really. When I think of the most popular cider variety that he is part of is the Wickson, right?
Yes.
Is there any other one that we're missing there?
There's the Humboldt crab. There's the Crimson.
Yeah.
I've worked with both of those before. There's Etter's Gold, which is really good.
Yeah.
Oso is very, very good. It's kind of a little bit of a bigger Wickson, but still has that profile, almost like an apple jelly flavor to it. It's not quite as tart as the Wickson. Has a little bit more sweetness in there.
Is the Gold? Wasn't that like named after his wife?
Is it the
Catherine? Is the Gold the same thing as the Catherine?
The Catherine is named after his wife, and then the Waltana is named after his brother Walter, and I think his wife Anna. So,
my goodness, that's so cool. It's like really, I don't know if it's living history, but it's incredible history that is really important. So what do you do now with that orchard? Are you helping steward that a little bit with the folks who? I
try to with the time that I have, because it is close. As the crow flies, but like I said, rural
you can't
mountains.
Get there from here.
It takes just under 2 hours from Eureka to get out there. So it's sometimes people come through town and they're like, "Oh, can I go see the Etter orchard?" I'm like, "You got to give me more notice."
How big is it?
It's pretty substantial. There's a property line on one side of it, which is where his brother's property is, and it's still owned by Etter descendants, Michael Etter. And there's probably 120 trees. I've gone over there a couple times, but like I said, that was his brother August's plot. And then where the current orchard is, there's around 110 trees. I haven't been out there in a couple months, and there's probably at least one down after some windstorms we had. But so I've been grafting them. I had been, taking cuttings every winter, bringing them back to Eureka and planting them at a nursery in Eureka. But just last May, I went out there and fenced in, because it's still an open cattle ranch. So I went out and I fenced in an area and put some trenches in there. Marty helped me dig the trenches with his tractor, and then I fence it in so the cattle can't get to it, and put a row of trees out there. And then I'll be back out there next month doing cuttings, and I think it'll be a lot easier to spend a couple nights down there, take the cutting, graft them, put them in the ground.
They must know that they have a very special orchard there.
They do.
They do? Okay,
yes,
great.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, I mean, it's unique. You don't see like a renowned pomologist's orchard like that. And these trees, he passed away in 1950, right?
Yes.
And so they're like 100 plus years old, right?
Yeah.
So these are massive standard sized
They're
trees.
huge. Yeah.
That were pruned at one point,
Yes.
right, by him, and
Yeah.
then were kind of let go. So
Yeah, it hadn't been pruned, for almost 70 years when the first time I went out there. There was a chain gang came through from the prison and did some pruning, I believe, in the 90s, but they butchered the trees.
I bet they
Like
did.
they had chainsaws out there. Oh my gosh.
no.
Yeah, I'm surprised some of the ones that they hit really bad are still standing actually. But
How did he space the trees? Did you do any kind of interesting setup there?
no,
that
he just
would be-
did a grid.
He just did a grid.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
like 15 feet apart.
They're about 30 feet apart.
30 feet apart.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
So he knew to space it out
Yeah.
pretty well.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
And all apples. Did he do any other palm fruit?
yeah, he has pears out there. A lot of pears.
Pears or
there
just
is one perry tree.
one pear tree?
Yeah, that's the most beautiful tree in the
Really?
orchard. It almost looks like a Christmas tree.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is a good standard sized pear.
Yes.
Look, that Christmas tree look.
Yeah,
And does it produce?
it produces a lot.
No kidding.
A lot.
Wow.
Yes, very.
What's the size of those guys?
I don't know, like
Well,
that.
he's holding
probably.
his fingers
Yeah,
apart,
probably
it looks like 4 inches or so.
4 or 5 inches. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Inedible. Definitely.
Inedible, perfect kind of pear that we like.
Tastes like you're eating a perfume.
And does it have any damage to it from critters or any
It doesn't.
kind of fire blight?
It doesn't. Not on
Nothing.
that tree.
Wow.
Yeah. That tree is resilient. Every other tree there has plenty of damage. There have been issues with black bears out there. A few of the trees, they climb up into the middle of
They
them
do.
and tear the branches down and make like a little sleeping area.
Yeah.
And then-
Yeah.
But there hasn't been a black bear out there in a couple years. That one disappeared.
Interesting. So the pear tree, where did he position that in the orchard?
So
Because it likes a lot of room.
yeah,
to
so
spread.
that's
out to
what
the
would that
side.
be? Like the south end of the orchard. It's at the edge.
And how many acres are we talking about that is currently the orchard?
Currently, it's probably about 10 acres.
10 acres,
Yeah,
so sizable.
and so it was really big. Yeah, like I said, he had over 12,000
Yeah.
varieties out there at one point. And so in that 10 acres, they're spread out. Some of them are close together. He had in one corner, he had a cabin that he built. And, like I said earlier, once you get to outside of Eureka, you get, the 4 seasons. And down there, it can get up in the 90s, regularly during the summer. And so for shade, he planted a whole bunch of different trees, including Sequoia giganteum, the variety that's found in the Sierras.
Yeah.
In the Sierra.
I've tried to plant that out here. Every time I
Yeah.
go to California, I put one in my suitcase and try to bring it back, but it's always happening around the winter, and I think it's just a really bad time to kind of transplant it. But
Yeah, he has a big palm tree out there. He has a monkey
Wow.
puzzle tree.
monkey puzzle,
Yeah,
wow,
yeah.
those are beautiful.
So I've brought some people out there from the National Park Service, and one of them is a tree expert. And it's like a mecca for tree enthusiasts.
I'm sure it
And so
is.
she saw what she thinks is the biggest live oak she's ever seen out there, and it was on our drive out to the orchard, just a wild live oak, and then there's still a bunch of chestnut trees in the orchard too.
Wow.
So chestnuts, pears, and
Fantastic.
apples, and so
Healthy chestnut is
Yeah.
kind of unique.
where he planted those bigger trees and the palm tree were around where his cabin was, and so he used it for shade.
Sure.
And so the varieties that I like the most in the orchard all are kind of by where his cabin is. And so, my guess is that the varieties he liked, he planted closer to where he was living, and then, the inedible ones are further away, like the perry tree.
Well, thank you for helping steward that.
Yeah, I'm trying to graft every tree out there and did some genetic testing with Washington State University a few years ago, and the results came back, and most of them didn't have matches. So, and they found some interesting, lineage tied to the Wickson in there as well, which I can share. I can email you those results. But there's still some red fleshed ones out there. There's the Wicksons are out there. We had a hit for Wickson, had a hit for the Humboldt crab as well.
Doing the DNA is still at its infancy.
Yes.
So until you get all the pieces of the puzzle together, you don't really know. So it doesn't have a hit yet, but maybe it potentially
A lot
will.
of the ones that didn't have hits out there, the Wickson was either a parent or a grandparent, which was interesting.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's a lot of crab apples out there. There's one tree that's stunning and it has 5 different grafts on it, and one of them is purple branches. It's a red fleshed.
Wow.
It's a very odd apple. It's
Purple
not
branches.
red fleshed. If you cut down the center, it has like a heart shaped around the seeds that come out. That comes out light pink, and then the seeds are dark red. But you cut through the branch and it's purple inside the branch. But that tree in spring is stunning because it has 5 different color blossoms on it, and then they're all apples. It's pretty
incredible. And they all are blossoming at the same time, or
Yeah.
different? Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. I mean, that was a very typical homestead thing to do, right? To graft multiple different varieties on a tree, not necessarily to have them all fruiting or ripening at the same time, is what I should say. I know my grandmother did that, and a lot of people did, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, they have Gravensteins out there too. So, the Gravensteins come out, those ones that he planted are kind of further away from his house. And those come on in August. And then the last one there that comes on is probably the Christmas pink, which is right next to his house. I actually have one of those in my backyard, and there's still apples hanging on the tree now.
it's February.
Yeah,
that
that's February.
My goodness.
But that one's ready typically early November, and then he would keep it for a month before eating it.
Very interesting.
That's why they called it the Christmas pink. He'd pick it in November.
Christmas pink.
Yeah.
I find it so fascinating, and I'm sure what everybody's wondering is, do those apples get used?
Yes. So we pick as many as we can. Any that fall are fair game for the cattle.
Okay.
Yeah. And there is quite a bit of cattle out there. It's always interesting when you're up on the orchard ladder and you're picking, and the herd hears some thuds, and they come calling, and then
But you have the fencing up now.
just around where the nursery is.
Okay.
Marty and Maury do eventually want to fence off the orchard. I've been talking about it for a while, but Marty, running a ranch, as anybody knows, in agriculture is a lot of work. And Marty was one of the section chiefs for Cal Fire, so he's been really busy. He gets sent around to really big fires. Wow. He's been all over the state. He was in Hawaii for the fires on Maui. So he's a very busy guy, and with all the work that they have to do on the ranch, fencing in the orchard is probably pretty low on the list. I do think that it will get fenced eventually, but
I mean, you got it going on, and he's obviously in the know, so a little bit goes a long way there.
Yeah.
One step at a time, right? Those apple trees have been surviving for over 100 years.
Yes.
So they're, just kind of keep on keeping on.
Yeah, and we're trying to make it an annual thing too, to go down there the second weekend of September, and then have a group down there. We all pick, and then we camp out. It's on the Mattole River, so there's a really nice campsite there.
Nice.
And so we camp on the river and pick apples during the day, go swimming, and it's a good time.
Is that open to other people at
Yeah,
all? Okay, all right. So your contact info in the show notes, and they know how to.
Yeah, they can reach out. Yeah.
Okay, well,
yeah.
that sounds
it's
like
a lot of
fun.
national parks people, and then some people in the cider world too.
Yeah, well, we're kind of seeing that more and more, like in Yosemite, they had the old orchards there that were part of the homesteads, and then they're kind of now doing talks and opening it up.
Yeah, I was there for
much
the apple camp.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So one of my good buddies, Keith Park, does the orchard management plan for Yosemite, and he runs the John Muir National Home Site in Martinez, California, and he comes every September too.
Fantastic! Wow, that must be just party for apple heads, right?
Yeah.
What a time.
Yeah,
Jeez.
he rolls out there on his motorcycle. He loves taking his travel motorcycle up there and
That's the way to ride up to the Redwoods. Damn. Yeah. Where is it located? Like, how inland from the ocean is it?
It's over the first ridge.
Okay.
So
all right. Kind of like going to San Jose from Santa Cruz, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like a 17 mile.
A little probably closer than that.
Oh, all right.
But yeah, I don't know, 10, 15 miles maybe.
Okay, not too bad.
And it's the King Range is that stretch of mountains there. And it's called the Lost Coast. So it's the longest continuous stretch of undeveloped coastline in the lower 48 states, United States of America.
Very cool.
So, yeah.
Now, I know that he planted that orchard because he really believed that California should have its own apples.
Yes.
And also thought California would be really good for growing apples. And historically, going back to Monterey Bay, I mean, that whole Watsonville area used to ship overseas the amount of apples. It was incredible.
Humboldt shipped a lot too. And
via boat?
Via boat, yeah. Out of they had a couple wharfs. One of them was at the mouth of the Mattole River, so Albert would take his wagon down alongside the river and then load them up. And so that was one of the things that he was trying to breed specifically is apples that kept well, didn't bruise easily because they were were in the back, which is why he was using Baldwin in the cross for John Wynn. And so he was going over rocky, rugged terrain in a wagon trying to get him to the wharf, and so he wanted him to hold up on the ride. And he wanted to make an apple champagne, which is why he was going for a lot of the French cider varietals when he was doing his breeding for Wickson. And then he also was one of those people who didn't like being told what he couldn't do. So I think that's where a lot, the red-fleshed apples were seen as a novelty back then. And most of them had been grown on the East Coast and the Midwest, and they didn't do very well. So when he planted those in his orchard and they did very well, he was like, aha, people say this isn't a good apple. I'm going to show them that red-fleshed apples can be good too.
And here he is years later, and we're talking about him because it's one of those amazing specimen orchards that has impacted both sides of the culinary and the cider making industry. Really a special, orchard in person.
And for those of you at home who want to read more about Albert Etter, I wrote an article about him in the California Garden and Landscape History magazine. I'm forgetting the last word. That publication, and that issue was great. I wrote about Albert. There's a lot of photos of the orchard then and now. And then Keith Park, the Yosemite orchard guy, he also contributed an article in that magazine, and it talks a lot about old homestead orchards in Northern California. So you can Google that, Eden, E-D-E-N, Albert Etter.
I think this is important for people listening out there. If you are at all enticed by this, to follow that up. Not even in California, but in all the different places where there is migration, you're going to be finding these orchards, and we want to be preserving it because time is running out in that way. And it is ticking away. But that orchard sounds like it's really going. Are there any new plantings in there, or is just as it is? Yeah,
I have them in rows in the nursery that I fenced off.
Okay.
And then we're going to start planting them out back in the orchard bit by bit as they get bigger. And the original spacing that he was doing. And what I want to do is like you're saying, apple trees they live long, but they don't live forever. And so these are falling down, 1, 2, 3 a year. And so what my goal is to take a cutting of each tree and then plant that right next to where it currently is. And Marty and I were talking a few months ago about getting the fencing out there. Otherwise, we have to fence off each individual tree. And there's some big cows out there.
Yeah.
They like to remind you when they bump into the pole on the orchard ladder.
Oh, boy.
That's not for scratching your back.
Now, what about the rootstock? What rootstock are you using?
I'm using MM111 on some of it, and then the majority are standard.
Okay.
Because I want to just put it back on, what he would have used.
Sure.
They've got those deep tap roots. There's a ton of ground squirrels out there, hundreds.
Dear.
And they like, getting down and making little houses in the roots. So the further those roots can go down, the better.
And it's not a super dry area.
No, it's not.
Yeah, so that's not a concern. But yeah, boy, the little rodents.
Yeah.
that's a whole other story.
Yeah,
there.
one of the gentlemen who goes out there on the ranch a lot was out there, and he picked off over 100 in a day. He was on his ATV. He was just sitting there. He got is it CO2 powered? He got some
like
some
a
sort of
paintball or something.
Yeah, he got
like
some sort of rifle, a 22 caliber
air gun. Yeah.
He got a 22 caliber air gun because with it being silent, they don't scatter like they would with the other one. But yeah, there's a lot out there, which brings a lot of bobcats too.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, cycle of life. There it goes, right there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're kind of keeping it going. That's really, really fascinating. I'm so glad that we had this opportunity to catch up about this.
Yeah, it's a stunning, stunning orchard. Just even if the orchard wasn't there, you get out there and it's like you're saying, those stereotypical like rolling California hills that are green in the winter and that golden color in the summer and early autumn, and you got the mountains to the west and the Mattole River and Bear Creek. The confluence is right there, and you can just stand out there and listen to the bees and the wind rolling through the hills, and take some deep breaths. It's a really kind of a spiritual place and a good place to reset.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
I really appreciate this conversation.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
To follow up on something that was mentioned in this here episode, number 494 with Tom Hart of Humboldt Cider, go to the show notes for this episode, which you will find at ciderchat.com. If you've listened this far, then I imagine you felt that this episode was worth your while. So do please consider hitting the donate button or becoming a patron at the Cider Chat Patreon page. Just go to ciderchat.com and you'll find all the links right there. Or search for Cider Chat and Patreon. That's spelled Patreon. And with that, I leave you here. This is Real Wind Caller signing off for now. Looking forward to seeing you in Ciderville.